Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the 73rd Emerging Growth Conference and day 2 of our 2-day Super Virtual Investor Conference. Today, we're focused on biotech, therapeutics, and other medical companies. I'm Anna Berry, everyone. For those watching today, we're running until about 5 p.m. Eastern. And when we switch to the next company, you might see a black screen for a moment. If you do experience downtime for more than a minute or two, just refresh your browser. Everything usually works properly once you do that again. And our platform does work best on Google Chrome. All of our conferences are uploaded to the Emerging Growth Conference YouTube channel, so please subscribe, youtube.com/Emerging Growth Conference. Now, today, during each company's presentation, you can submit questions through the webcast module, and we will attempt to address as many of these at the end of their presentation. And one last note, after today's event, you'll be redirected to the registration page for our next conference, so stay on or come back to reserve your spot early. We are beginning with Immuron Limited. It trades on the ASX under the symbol IMC and on the NASDAQ under the symbol IMRN. It's a biopharmaceutical company focused on developing and commercializing orally delivered targeted polyclonal antibodies for the treatment of infectious diseases. We'll be speaking with its CEO, Steve Lydeamore. Mr. Lydeamore has over 30 years in pharma experience, working in Australia, Canada, and USA in sales and marketing, manufacturing, R&D, business development, and finance. Mr. Lydeamore has commercial experience in 113 countries, having led an international specialty pharma division with over 100 million in sales, over 150 employees, and also an international generic pharma division with over 550 million in sales and over 1,550 employees. Quite the experience. Happy to welcome Steve to the conference. Good afternoon to you, Steve.
Yes, and good morning to you. Thank you.
All right, the floor is yours. Call me back when you're ready for questions.
Okay, very good. Well, thanks for joining me this morning, everybody. My pleasure to be here again on Emerging Growth. And I'll just quickly skip through the safe harbour statement. There are some forward-looking statements as well as financials for the financial year ended June 2024 that have yet to be audited. Quick overview of the company for those that aren't familiar. We are a small biotech company based in Australia, in Melbourne, and we develop and commercialise oral immunotherapeutics for gut-mediated diseases. And we have 2 products on the market, Travelan and Protectin, and I'll talk to you about Travelan today. That's our lead product. We sell it in Australia, Canada, and USA, and we had just finished a record year in June, so we did $4.9 million in sales, which was fantastic. We have 3 therapeutic programs in 4 clinical trials, and I'll talk a little bit about those as well. Quick business update. Travelan, as I said, is growing strongly. We just read out top-line results in March on Travelan, and we have end of July the completion of the data set for that coming out, so that's not too very far away now. And CAMPTEC, another therapeutic, also completed phase 2 dosing, and we've just doing the data analysis at the moment, and the data, top-line data for that's due in August. So we've got results coming in July and August. And I met recently with the Uniformed Services University. They're doing a very large study in US and UK military personnel with our Travelan product, 866 participants, and they're 77% recruited. So that's great. They're targeting completing that trial in December, which will mean they'll report in the first quarter of next calendar year. And excitingly, we just filed a pre-IND with the FDA, IMM 529 for Clostridioides difficile. So lots of things going on here. So quick financial snapshot of the company. We're roughly a 20 million Australian dollar market cap company, and you'll see as at December, we haven't reported June figures yet, we had Australian $15 million in cash. So not a very high enterprise value for all of the good things I've just told you about, commercial products as well as 3 therapeutics and 4 clinical programs. Let me just tell you a little bit about the technology platform. So it's quite unique. It is colostrum based, and I'll explain what we do that's different than the generic colostrums that are sold in the market. So we actually develop specialised vaccines for targeted pathogens. And in the case of Travelan, that's 13 different types of enterotoxigenic E. coli. These types of E. coli are the primary causes of traveller's diarrhea, and none of us want to get that. when we vaccinate the pregnant cow, the colostrum that they produce for the calf contains antibodies that are specific for those targeted pathogens. And the good thing about that, it's a non-antimicrobial product. There's no antimicrobial resistance, and it doesn't enter the bloodstream. It acts locally at the source. It clears the target pathogen from the gut wall and neutralises the toxins at its source. And in Australia and Canada, we're able to make label claims. So for Travelan, we can claim both reduction of traveller's diarrhoea or prevention, as well as relief. Unfortunately, in the US at the moment, we cannot do that, and it's sold as a dietary supplement, primarily through Amazon, but also Walmart.com. And we're working on clinical trials for IMM124E, which is the active drug substance in Travelan, with a view to getting that product approved by the US FDA, so we can promote it with label claims to prescribing physicians and the like. So let me move on to the next slide and tell you a little bit more about how it works. Sometimes pictures are better than words, and what you can see here is how Travelan works. So without Travelan, you can see bacteria attaching to the gut wall and burying in and doing their bad stuff. And on the right, you can see Travelan, where the bacteria are being neutralised by the Travelan antibodies. Let's talk about the clinical program. So I mentioned we've got 3 different therapeutics. So that's IMM124E, which is also known as Travelan, IMM529 for Clostridioides difficile, and also CAMP-ETEC. And each of these are a colostrum-based product. The difference between them is a different vaccine that's being given to the cow. So in the case of IMM529, that's for Clostridioides difficile, and CAMP-ETEC, that's a conjugated vaccine for both Campylobacter and enterotoxigenic E. coli. IMM124E just completed phase 2. As I mentioned, we have the rest of the data coming out at the end of July. We're looking at having a clinical study report, draft 1, available in August. We'll submit that likely in September to the FDA and request that end of phase 2 meeting. We're planning to move into phase 3 next calendar year. On Clostridioides difficile, we just filed pre-IND on the 1st of July, so that's very recent news. And CAMP-ETEC, I mentioned before that we've completed phase 2, and that data will read out, top-line data, in August. So a rich pipeline of milestones coming up. And the Uniformed Services University study that I mentioned before, first calendar quarter of next calendar year. So why are we excited about this market opportunity? So it is a $1 billion market, and our sales, as record as they are, really is just touching the surface, mostly sales in Australia. We're looking to really grow the North American market. I mentioned we're selling Travelan in USA and Canada. So what does the US market look like? If we get 15% penetration, we're looking at a $83 million sales potential in that market. And in Europe, we're looking at UK specifically within that market at the moment. That's another $50 million. So big market itself just for Travelan. The IMM529 for Clostridioides difficile, that's a $1.7 billion market in its entirety. We'll be looking at taking a subset of that for initially second recurrence, which is around a US $100 million opportunity for us. And we'd be looking to expand up the treatment chain to get more of that. So plenty of good things to go after with this platform technology of ours. For those that aren't familiar with traveller's diarrhoea, the Centres for Disease Control estimate that between 30 and 70% of people travelling to these high-risk regions do get traveller's diarrhoea. So it's a big problem. And there's about 60 million Americans that do travel to these high-risk regions each year, so hence the big market potential. And there is no FDA-approved drug for prevention of traveller's diarrhoea. So here's a graph of our record sales. You can see we hit rock bottom there in the middle of COVID. Of course, no one buys traveller's diarrhoea preventatives during that time, but since the international travels open up, the trajectory of the sales has been ever increasing. And at the end of June, we hit that 4.9 million. I was hoping to get to the 5, didn't quite make it. But next year, we're planning on maintaining some growth in Australia, but some good growth potential in both US and Canada. And IMM124E, once again, completed phase 2. These are the results that we got. So we showed more than 36% protective efficacy against ETEC. And most importantly, for our collaborators in the US Department of Defense, 66.7% protective efficacy for severe diarrhea, and a statistically significant 83.3% reduction in a number of subjects. And for the military, this would be active military personnel in the field, not having to get early antibiotic treatment. And it's important to note that only those on the placebo received IV fluids post-challenge, and none in the Travelan group. We also had a reduction in adverse events of 56%. So overall, very, very positive results. And we're looking forward to taking those results, meeting with the FDA, and moving into that phase 3 next calendar year. This one really excites me. We just filed pre-IND with the FDA in July. IMM529 for Clostridioides difficile. That's that large market potential for us. So that's in excess of US $100 million per annum. And we think we have the first triple mechanism of action product. And once again, a non-antibiotic. And the interesting thing about this C. difficile is it's moved from originally mostly a hospital-based problem. Now it's moving out into the community. And people do get treated with antibiotics, so vancomycin, metronidazole, and more recently phytomoxicin. But people get recurrence. And so initially we'll be looking at those recurrent patients. So this is 20% plus patients get treated and they get it back again and again. And so there's a big need for a product like ours to come in, and we showed efficacy in our preclinical trials there, showing prevention, protection, and treatment of primary disease. So a very good opportunity for us. And we're hoping to have that meeting with the FDA and move this one into phase 2 next calendar year. At the back of the slide deck, and these slides will be made available for everyone, these are clickable links. You can have a look at all this data. We've done a huge amount of work with the US Department of Defense, and we're very grateful for their funding. So they've funded the IMM124E preclinical studies with the AFRMs in Asia, also the Navy and the Army, and most recently this phase 2 trial of IMM124E and the Camp ETEC trial, all US Department of Defense funded. So very grateful for them. And the results of all of that work are shown here. And the great thing is that this product, even though it's specific for ETEC in the vaccine that we gave to the cow, has shown cross-reactivity to a broad spectrum of different bacteria. In fact, some up to 180 different types of bacteria that showed activity against. So very broad spectrum, which is good for traveller's diarrhea. You never really know what bug you're going to be facing. So I might just stop there, Anna, and hand back to you for questions.
All right, perfect. Thank you, Steve. Okay. We have a question from Connor asking, how are your products getting to market? Are you doing it all in-house, or do you have a packer or distributor?
So it varies by market. So in Australia, we sell, which is the largest market for us, we sell into retail pharmacy, and we're in more than 3,500 pharmacies. So we're in roughly 80% of the value of pharmacies in Australia. And we do our own marketing, but we do use a third-party pharma broker sales force in that market. Similarly, in Canada, we do the same. That's a pharmacy, retail pharmacy type market. In the US at the moment, where we don't have label claims, we're primarily selling it either directly to Passport Health, which is the US's largest retail travel clinic, Amazon and Walmart.com, so online. And we work with a company called Market Performance Group to assist us in doing that.
And your sales growth is pretty impressive. Should we expect this to continue?
Yes, you certainly shall. If you have a look at, I think in our press releases, it's not in the slide deck here, I report both Australian and US statistics on international travel, and both of them are continuing to increase. So they're greater than what they were pre-pandemic, and they continue to grow. But yeah, that's sort of the underlying growth potential. But really, where the growth is going to come from is our sales and marketing efforts. As I mentioned, there are no FDA-approved products for prevention of traveller's diarrhea. And it's our task to make people aware that our product exists, and we're doing a pretty good job of that in Australia, as you've seen from the strong growth. If you take Australian sales and you gross it up by the population of the US, clearly we've got a lot more work to do in that area. So we'll continue to work towards that, and we expect strong growth in our financial year 2025.
And Emmett wants you to break down the timeline for the US FDA approvals, if you can. What stage are you at?
Yeah, so we've just completed phase 2. We'll have our we'll submit that final clinical study report around September to the FDA, have an end of phase 2 meeting. We'll probably have another meeting with the FDA for a phase 3 meeting. We're hoping to get started on phase 2 trials in middle of 2025. We'll need to do 2, we do know that, and they'll be similar to that Uniform Services University study, so larger field studies with people travelling to high-risk regions, so still placebo-controlled, blinded studies. Each one of those trials will roughly take around 2 years. So if we run them in parallel, and that's certainly a consideration, that would be 2 years from the middle of next year. And then there's another year or so on top of that before we would, earliest we'd be looking at FDA approval.
And Mac asks about Travelan. Is it being sold on Amazon? Is it mainly sold there or other places?
Yeah, so we use a couple of different distributors in the US that sell into doctors' offices and the like. We sell to Passport Health, as I mentioned before, travel clinics. But Amazon.com is our largest sales route at the moment, and we've recently launched on Walmart.com, so we expect they would continue to grow as well.
And Aaron wants to know what drugs are the current competition for Travelan. What's the difference between yours?
Yeah, so mostly at the moment, people anticipate that they may get traveller's diarrhea, and they take medicines with them to deal with it after the fact. So you get traveller's diarrhea, you would take Imodium to stop bowel movements. You would take rehydration salts to refresh what you've given up through the diarrhea. Aren't really other products that we directly compete against that are preventative.
And Thomas wants you to break down your cost of sales. Is it moving in tandem to sales growth, or is the cost tapering off? We use contract manufacturers, so we have a fixed cost of goods. So the percentage gross margin that we make is a function of the selling price in the market and versus the cost of goods. And the US is a little bit higher, I think, than Australia. So as US sales grow, hopefully that margin will spread a bit, but we're all challenged with the cost of goods going up through CPI and the like. So anyway, we'll try and maintain roughly where we are at the moment, which is around 70% gross margin. And with that, Mark wants to know, how does the company grow? Is it increasing sales of current and soon in trial products, or do you have other ailments you're working on? What's your growth strategy?
We're certainly going to grow Travelan. We're looking at taking the other product we have, Protectin, potentially into new channels as well. We're also looking at licensing in complementary products to market alongside Travelan. The clinical programs we're working on, as I've just gone through the timeline with Travelan, they're quite a few years away. So they have huge market potential, but not in the near term. So sales growth is going to drive revenue top line from Travelan and other products that we bring in, but future value, arguably even bigger, will come from those therapeutic programs.
And you touched on this earlier, but Joe wants you to talk a little bit more about your marketing strategy. What does it look like?
Yeah, it varies by market. So in Australia and Canada, we work and we have label claims. So we're able to promote to mostly pharmacies, so pharmacists, pharmacy assistants. We do in-store training and promotions. We do in-store advertising. We do catalogs, all of the typical things you would do with a retail pharmacy. And we back that up also with social media type advertising. In the US, primarily it is that social media type advertising. So we use Google Ads. We use the Amazon platform for marketing. We do various promotions on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, etc. And that seems to be working very, very well.
And talk a little bit about C. difficile. The market size is pretty significant. Tell us more about the next milestone for this clinical program.
Yeah, so that $1.7 billion number sounds fantastic, but that's a future aim if we can get to treating primary disease. So that predominantly is those antibiotics that I mentioned. But the Lumanity that did a market evaluation before we spent the money to get to where we are today estimates we're around the US $100 million per annum sales potential for second recurrence. If we can get 10% more patients, moving up the chain a bit, that adds another $40 million market potential per annum. So there is certainly big growth potential there. Just filed that pre-IND. We'll get feedback from the FDA on that. We'll prepare an IND filing. So we're planning on filing IND. And once that's approved, we'll then proceed to with a phase 2 trial next calendar year.
Fantastic. And besides the C. difficile, you have some other important milestones coming up in the near term. Summarize when we should expect them.
Yeah, so IMM124E phase 2, remaining data end of July. Camp ETEC phase 2 top-line data in August. And we'll have other milestones to report on these programs as well, as we have these FDA meetings and the like. The Travelan Uniform Services University, the large phase 4 study, that'll complete dosing likely in December, and we'll have data to report in the first quarter of next calendar year. So lots of clinical milestones coming up.
Wonderful. Well, Steve, do you have any closing remarks for our viewers today?
No, look, perhaps a little bit unusual, but I'm giving you here, this is my personal mobile phone and email address. I know that time and distance can sometimes be a factor, so I try to make myself available to everybody in both Australia and the US. So do feel free to follow up and ask me any questions that you were not willing or able to make during the presentation today. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you for your time, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.
Very good. Thanks very much.
All right, everyone, stay with us. We'll be right back with Cytomed.